Hey folks, Joe Valley here with my co-host Pat Yates for the Quiet Light Podcast. Pat, how are you?
I am great, Joe. Thanks for having me in today.
You were so energized just a minute ago, and now you're so chill and calm. What's the deal?
Yeah, I was slow getting that first one out. It's awesome to be here, though. I'm excited to talk to Clay.
Clay Copeland is our guest, folks. He's a client of Quiet Lights. He sold his business. Really amazing story. Pat worked with him. It was a side hustle, full-time job and a side hustle that he sold for multiple seven figures. And in a really unique industry. We're not going to tell you the brand. We're not going to tell you the exact dollar amount, but we're going to dance around everything a little bit and just tell you his story so that you can learn from it and hopefully get inspired as well. Pat, you want to say a little bit more about Clay, your client, before we bring him on?
Absolutely. It's exciting to bring Clay in. I have talked several times about Clay to other clients as I've been through this. He's just one of the more realistic and humble entrepreneurs I've ever talked to, much less sold something for. It was such a great process, and the group that bought him is thrilled at what it was, thrilled as him as a person. It couldn't have gone better, and he's a great guy to work with. So.
All right, Clay, welcome to the Quiet Light Podcast. You now officially have to send Pat a Christmas card.
Uh-oh. All right. Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
It's good to have you here. So a little bit of background on yourself. If you could tell the folks a little bit about what you do every day, how you started this business, and we're just going to go from there.
Sure. So I've always kind of been an entrepreneur at heart. As a child, I sold different things. If I had a baseball card collection or golf balls I found, or, a lemonade stand. From a young age was really, had an entrepreneurial spirit. And so it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to start some kind of business. Had interest in finance and just business. So went to school for that. Graduated, took a job, and have been in that since. And, during that process, I always wanted to start something a little more, engaging than just my little side hustles, and see if I could grow something into a legitimate business. So, a lot of conversations with my father. We kind of brainstormed some ideas, and there's some things that, interest me. And this particular venture that we embarked on was kind of in the magnet fishing space. And it's something that he had experience in when he was a child in the 60s. My uncle used to build docks here in some local lakes, and they would drop tools and different things. And so my father would go, and he had an old surplus magnet. And that just got me thinking, another passion of mine as a child was metal detecting and treasure hunting, that kind of thing. And so, it just got me thinking, hey, that sounds like something cool. I'd like to do that. And really didn't think of it as as a business opportunity at first. But when he told me that story, I borrowed a magnet from him that just didn't work really. It was a good magnet, but it wasn't made for magnet fishing. Wasn't really something that functioned as that type of search tool. So the first time I took it out, threw it out, I got it hung on a rock immediately. Of course, I wasn't prepared to go in for it, but I wasn't willing to lose it either since it wasn't my magnet. So stripped down and jumped in this lake and swam out and got the magnet. And that was the first and kind of only experience with magnet fishing I had.
And you're from Georgia too, so there might have been some gators or poisonous snakes in those lakes.
Well, fortunately, we're far enough north. There's no gators, but some snakes, yeah, for sure. This particular place, there's a lot of them, but I didn't see any that day. And I think even if I did, I would have gone in. I wasn't willing to go back to my father and tell him that I'd lost it. But that just got the wheels turning. That hey, this is something interesting. It's kind of an emerging market that there really weren't any big players in at the time, and thought, we can do something better. My dad's an engineer, and he's got, mechanical background. So we started talking it through and looking at ideas, and what was available just wasn't right. And so we thought we can do this better and provide something into the market that's not really available. So that's what got it started maybe 5 years ago now. And just one thing led to another, and I had that kind of cliche growing from, garage into, big warehouse, but it's a true story of how it grew like that.
Well, I want to go through all of that. So 5 years from concept to exiting for multiple seven figures, but I want to get into that. And as I'm sure Pat does as well, but I want to know what you do for a day job, and why the hell do you still have a day job when you sold the business for multiple seven figures?
Yeah, I think I'm just a creature of habit, really. My day job is in institutional governmental type lending. So it's, finance related, doing infrastructure loans, water and sewer type loans. It's a great job. Like I mentioned, I started in college and haven't really known anything else.
How old are you now, Clay?
I'm 35.
Okay. I see a little gray spot on the chin there. I thought
Yeah, I know. I get razzed about that.
That's
a lot.
because he had to work with me.
Yeah, it was the stress of dealing with Pat, I think.
Pat's got the same gray spot on his chin. Look at that. You guys are like twins.
There you go. But yeah, it's all institutional and governmental type lending. And, I really like that job, but, I grew the business kind of along with that. And fortunately had my parents to take a lot of that responsibility of the day-to-day stuff from me because I didn't have time, obviously working a full-time job.
So this ended up being a partnership with your parents.
Basically, yeah, I hired them on, used their space. They actually had a kind of a warehouse space that we took over and eventually built a secondary warehouse on their property.
Cool.
And they just live a couple miles from us. So it was in kind of a natural partnership. My mother was retired. My father was kind of right at retirement age. So it made sense for them to step in and do a lot of the things that I couldn't do. But, having a day job, it made a lot of long nights, working during the day and then picking up my side hustle in the evenings, but it was
impressive.
Worth it.
How did you, it's an original product. How did you source the product or design the product? Like what did you do?
Yeah, so there was kind of a basic idea around this type of magnet. It's all magnet, neodymium fishing magnet type product. And there were some standard shapes and designs available that worked and do okay, but didn't, excel really at what they were doing. So what we did was come in and, tested a variety of shapes. We did some of our own design. My father being an engineer, he did some CAD files. We used Alibaba going through the RFP process to try to narrow down some suppliers. These are all manufactured overseas. Unfortunately, there's not any domestic production capability. So dealt with overseas manufacturers and made trips over, took our drawings, did some designs, and we continue to make changes. Customer feedback's been huge for incorporating design changes. As people use it and get, dozens or hundreds of hours on it, they know it, in and out. And so we take a lot of that feedback and incorporate it. And, one thing we never wanted to do was cheapen our products and, you kind of join in that race to the bottom. So that was something we refused to do. And because of it, we have, premium product that maybe is a little bit higher price point, but, it's better. So, we stand behind everything we make, think it's tailored to what it's made to do. And, we continue to release some exciting products.
That's amazing. Clay, one of the things, we talked about current situation, the business future. We talked to people as we were on calls about where it could go. One interesting thing people would probably want to know is how much you invested to start this. And, I'm sure you have to rewind in your mind a lot, but maybe, give them some insight on when you started a side hustle with a job, what you had to do to make it get to market.
Yes. So it was a true bootstrap kind of business. I think it was $4,000 that I had made selling junk on eBay and invested that kind of in my initial purchase. Really had no clue what I was doing or how well it was going to go. And, got that in and put it on eBay and Amazon. And at that time, there was very little competition. So it just sold like crazy and started expanding from there. Did not want to take any outside money, although I did take a loan of $10,000 from an aunt. So shout out to her for believing in me early on. And
What's her name?
Paid. What's that?
What's her name?
It's Anita Stevens. So shout out to you and Anita. Thank you for helping me get started. She believed in it, loaned me some money. I got that paid back in, I think it was 3 or 4 months. I never really wanted to have that where I was beholden to somebody, or have that. And, honestly, looking back, that may have been a mistake early on. Probably could have grown faster with some outside capital, but, I'm pretty risk adverse, and that just wasn't really something that I wanted to do. Hindsight's always 20/20. There's things I would have done differently, but I just reinvested the earnings because I had a day job. I wasn't reliant on that income. So I never took a distribution. I never pulled anything out. Pretty much everything that we made went straight back into inventory and growth.
And did you do that because you knew that you were going to exit the business or eventually quit your job to run it? What was the plan, if there was one?
So the plan was that I didn't have a plan. And I knew the whole time I didn't know what was going to happen. I think in the back of my mind, it was either I need to quit my day job and focus on this or make an exit. And, I was really torn. I struggled with that question for a long time. Because I knew I wasn't doing my side hustle justice, right? To make it into a legitimate business and treat it the way it needed to be done, I didn't have the time. So that's really what got me to the point of deciding to exit, is that, I still enjoy my day job. And I'm not, doing my business justice. So let's pass it on to somebody that can take it and do what needs to be done.
What kind of revenue did you do in the first, you said it's been 5 years. So in the first year or so, what kind of revenue did you do?
So I think the first year was around 70,000 or so.
Okay. It's not real exciting, but
no, it wasn't. I mean, at the time that was huge. I was making $300 on eBay and thought that was a lot of money. So, I knew we were on to something great early on, but it wasn't life-changing money or anything like that.
But it was growing.
Was fun.
And
it was growing.
Everything that you made was going right back into keeping up with inventory and advertising costs and things like that.
Exactly. Everything was going back into it and never pulled anything out. We just plow it right back into inventory mostly. And that's what kind of led to outgrow the space in the house. And then we outgrew the garage, and then we outgrew the warehouse that my parents had to expand, because we just kept plowing it back into it.
I might be wrong, but I'm thinking that the capital requirements for inventory would be fairly sizable in this niche. Was it a high cost of goods sold on this product?
Yeah, it is compared to a lot of things. It wasn't unusual to bring in a container that might have been $80,000 or more in goods. So it was pretty easy to go burn through that cash.
You never had to raise any capital or use credit cards or HELOC or anything like that to buy inventory?
No, we never did. It certainly would have made things a little easier, looking back on it, but just that wasn't really within my level of risk tolerance. I took everything very slow, which, if I was doing it over again, I wouldn't do that, but no, never used any kind of credit card or anything.
By the time you exited the business 5 years later, what kind of revenue were you doing?
We were doing over 2 million.
And you still had a side hustle, and it was just your parents?
Yeah.
Did you have VAs? Who else do you have on board?
It was me and my mom and dad. That was
Wow.
it. We would occasionally bring in just some outside labor, maybe 10, 15 hours a month just to do things, stocking shelves, or if we had a special project, we had to kit some things or something like that, we would bring in people, but it was really just the three of us. And, without them, it never would have worked.
I think the thing, Clay, one thing I found out when I was starting to talk to as many people who were interested in this business a whole lot more, I got one consistent question literally every time. Nobody had any idea what magnet fishing was, which I'm sure you're getting all the time. It's like, how the heck do you catch a fish with a magnet? So yeah. I'm sure you heard that a lot. How did you educate customers? I'd really be interested to understand that. There are either people understand what it is or they don't. There was nothing in between.
Right. You're exactly right. And I still, in fact, today, I had a call from a customer that said, I just heard about magnet fishing 4 days ago and I want to get into it. So, it's something that it was an educational challenge for us. And really one of the biggest drivers of public awareness and perception of it was YouTube. You can tell people, hey, I throw a magnet in the water and I look for stuff, but that just sounds weird. And until you're watching somebody do it and seeing the kinds of things that they're finding, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So being able to see some of those guys on YouTube find guns or, whatever it was that they're finding, that motivates and gets people excited. And then there's been some news stories. Actually, a lot of news stories. People will find a weapon, that they turn in, and it was connected to crime or something. So, that's great local news, and we've seen a lot of those over the years.
Where do they do this from? A dock, a bridge, the
All,
side, the shoreline?
all of it, all of the above. Yeah, docks, bridges, and then just off the riverbank are kind of the main locations. Bridges tend to be, easily accessible, and a lot of junk gets thrown over bridges. Most of the weapons we see are off of, kind of an out of the way bridge but yeah, docks, we see a lot of sunglasses and fishing lures and little Leathermans and that kind of thing. So there's some distinct areas that people look, but docks and bridges are some of the most common.
How heavy is this magnet? It sounds like it would be.
So we have magnets that actual weight of the magnet is anywhere from about a half a pound up to 10.5 pounds. So they get pretty hefty, and they'll lift anywhere from 300 pounds up to our biggest will lift 3,600 pounds. It's a combined double-sided magnet. So, more than a person could lift.
Clay, I remember we were talking in diligence, you had discussed packaging, which was one thing I had never thought about. As these come over in containers, you get there and they'll all be stuck together. In my mind, I'm thinking, so that was that one of the things that was probably a challenge? Because you think about supply chain, when people build products, yours obviously needed to be something that wasn't going to have that kind of exposure. How did you deal with that when you were first learning about the business?
It's been a challenge, reading up on the regulations. You've got the IATA rules on air transportation for magnets. And so learning and understanding those and knowing how to create the packaging to minimize the magnetic field outside of the box. We shield some things, others we just use enough of a buffer. It's still an ongoing issue. A lot of times we're not quite sure the amount of space we need to, meet the rules. So we'll have to do a lot of testing. And, it leads to requiring bigger boxes than we would like. Obviously, it makes shipping a little more expensive, but for safety, you have to. We've seen pictures of competitors. They'll ship something, and the customer will get it, and then it'll be stick to their door, stick to whatever metal surface they have, and that's not okay. You don't want to receive something that's sticking it inside of the UPS truck, or pulls through the box when they try to pick it up. So we spend an inordinate amount of time making sure the packaging is proper.
I know that you have a Shopify store, so it's great. You saw on Amazon as well. Is that where you how did you start when you were first doing this? It was on the same, or did you look at different platforms? I'm sure entrepreneurs out there would want to understand a successful business, what kind of area they would launch on for their direct site.
Yeah, so I didn't honestly do a whole lot of evaluation. I looked at Shopify and then WooCommerce and some of the plugins, and ultimately, Shopify looked to be the easiest for what I wanted to do. I didn't need something very robust and a completely custom site. And for the limited number of SKUs we had, or even still have, it was fine. It's got its own quirks, and there's things that don't work well, but it's easy. It's not very expensive. There's a lot of apps and plugins that make it a little more robust. So just kind of in our brief evaluation of which way we wanted to go on the direct to consumer site, that Shopify ended up being, perfect fit for what we wanted.
Did you stick there, or did you expand to other platforms like Amazon?
So we initially started with Amazon and eBay and didn't have our D2C site. Okay. That came a little bit later. That was back, I guess, in the good old days of Amazon, when things were a little bit easier and just a little more straightforward than it is now. But we started there, and that worked. And then always knew we were going to have our own website, because didn't want to be really reliant on another platform. Wanted to build out our own channel. So, eventually moved into that. It was probably within the first year or so we built out the website. I actually did the initial Shopify site myself. It was terrible. I actually was blown away when somebody actually bought something. Looking back on it, it looked like the scammiest website, you can imagine. But we ended up hiring some professional developers, and they, made it look nicer and more professional, and have gone through a couple of design changes since then. But
I'm curious, by the time you exited the business, what percentage of the revenue was from that Shopify store versus Amazon or eBay?
So we were running.
And Clay, let me say for all the folks listening that are watching, your video has gone dark. We can't see that handsome face anymore. There he's back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. So it ended up being about 50-50. We made a very concerted effort to push traffic away from Amazon. I personally am not an Amazon fan. A lot of the policies weren't really friendly for what we were doing. There's some special considerations with magnets and other things that just made it difficult. So we did our best to pull traffic to our website, and so ended up about split.
Hey, I remember when we had the discussion about Amazon, you had a certain amount of SKUs and you didn't offer them all on Amazon. That was by choice because you wanted to push some people into your site to be able to buy some of the accessories and other things. What was the philosophy around not listing everything on Amazon? Because I think any company would normally just want to push everything there.
Yeah.
What was your philosophy?
So it was a little bit of that I didn't have the time to make the listings, and a little bit of, yes, I want to offer some things on the website that would be difficult to sell on Amazon. Some of our accessories are pretty low priced, and it made it, a challenge. We can offer it from our warehouse on the website much more cost effectively than we could with Amazon and paying their fees. So there were some products that just made sense to keep off of Amazon. And then there were a few things that we wanted to have kind of as an exclusive to us, like you say, to help hopefully bring people over to us. And then it was a little bit of, I just don't have the time because I have a day job to make all these listings.
That's pretty amazing. And to be clear, your buyer, if I understand it right, was an aggregator of Amazon businesses. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So for folks listening, aggregators of Amazon businesses are buying businesses that are not 100% Amazon businesses. 50% of your business was off of Amazon for the most part, right?
That's right.
Curious about the growth. If I looked at the growth chart of each channel, which one was growing the rapidest? Is that a word? Rapidest? Pat, help me out. Which one was growing?
Most rapid.
Most rapid.
We're not good with English. Go ahead.
That's all right. It was definitely the direct to consumer site, the Shopify site. With the effort we made, and then honestly, some of it was just that I wasn't paying attention to Amazon as much. And making the changes and trying to do what we need to do to stay competitive. There's the typical race to the bottom on Amazon, and a lot of platforms really. And I mentioned earlier, this is not something I wanted to participate in. I didn't want to cheapen the products, and I never really wanted to compete on price. We wanted to have the best customer service, which my mom, thank goodness for her, she handled all of that. And it quickly moved to the website kind of being where most of the growth was occurring.
One of the things we talked about, when you were trying to build your advertising, I think one thing that people out there would want to know is the anatomy of an exit, and exactly, because I talk to people all the time, like I'm scared to death to get into diligence and be able to talk about my business. I don't know exactly how people are going to feel about it. You went the opposite direction. You're probably the most genuine entrepreneur I've ever seen. What was it that would be apprehensive in that process, and how did you approach it when you were going through that? Obviously, you don't have to tell specifics, but how did you handle that? I mean, I know you're such a calm and smooth guy. Was it a departure? How did you feel about the whole process?
So it was, I was very apprehensive, to go through it. I knew early on when I decided to make that exit that I was not going to make any effort to do it without a broker. And I did a lot of research, and Quiet Light kept popping up. And then that's, how I reached out to you guys and kind of went through that interview process, discussing. I felt a lot more comfortable with the process because, honestly, having a day job, a lot of things that should have been done, especially with the books, were falling to the wayside. I did not have current up to the second books. There was a lot of question early on of, even what some of our net profit was or how to calculate things. I didn't know, I wasn't sitting down, keeping this up, which I knew was going to be a hindrance, but you put us in contact with some people to get kind of the books done going back in time. And that was a pretty painless process. I was worried how long that would take. And I think it just took maybe it was 6 weeks or so. We had all the catch up done, and you had some clean stuff, that was accurate, and got all the questions answered. So I was apprehensive, but I would tell anybody out there, any entrepreneur that's looking at making an exit, it didn't matter in my case that I did not have everything in order. We just kind of dove in, and it worked out quickly. So if that's keep holding you back, don't worry about it.
Well, it's interesting because that's a great lesson for anyone to learn. When you and I talked, you thought that your business was going to be barely 7 figures that you thought you would sell for. And then we got your financial straight. We looked at it. We understood the accrual versus the cash. We ended up selling it for well more than what you were thinking you were going to sell it for, which was incredible. That was a great thing. So you put in that time, and that's what paid off.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's looking back on it's kind of crazy process, but you're right. I had no clue what the business was worth. And I think even if I've done my own books, I still wouldn't have even known, but it was just kind of blown away in the end, how it all shook out. But it was 100% worth the effort, using you as a broker and going through that process and making sure all the books were right. And in the end, it made a massive difference to, from where I thought we might be to where we actually ended up.
It's pretty exciting to hear that. How long of a time period was it, so people understand, from that initial contact of Quiet Light and Pat to you deciding to pull the trigger and go ahead and officially list your business for sale?
It was pretty quick. I mean, Pat and I met, and I think we had maybe 1 or 2 conversations, and I was ready. We signed some contracts real early on, and then he started his process of putting the stuff together and got us in touch with the bookkeepers. And that all started pretty much right away. And Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was a matter of, I don't remember when the actual listing went out, but it was maybe a couple months after our initial contact, or maybe 2.5 months after initial contact, from, when I picked up the phone till when it was going out, as an official listing.
Were you in a situation, do you recall actually how long it took from the time that the business was listed for sale to initial contact or phone calls with potential buyers?
I think, Pat, didn't we have 3 in the first 7 days or so?
Yeah, we had 3 or 4 really quickly right in the first few days, and they all continued and came back. I'm trying to pull that information up right now. Hang on.
Do you recall how many offers you had, Clay?
There were 3 offers. Yeah, very different offers, but there were 3
widely varying offers. One that was wild. Yeah, we had 3 offers on it, but I mean, from the time of launch to get an LOI, it was less than 3 weeks. But building it up, it took us 4 or 5 weeks to get everything to market. We took a lot of time to make sure everything was correct.
That's generally, actually, for those listening, kind of quick, right? I was on a podcast before starting to record this one, and the host asked me how long we like to chat with clients before they list the business for sale. And I said, well, the longer the better, right? If we could start, 12 months prior, so that, you're really prepared and marching towards your exit goal, the ultimate result is, Clay, in your situation, you probably would have made more money if you had, reversed that process back 12 months and started working towards it a little bit more, because you get excited about the potential and the goal and the target number that you're reaching for, and you can pull certain levers in the business to increase the value, hopefully not push a lever and have it plummet, but the longer the better. So this is pretty quick. And it's interesting. Pat, you said it's 3 weeks to go under letter of intent, and that you had 3 offers. Clay, you said the average year to date, the average in the last 12 months is 3.84 offers on every listing, Clay. So you were less than average there, but I think if you waited, you might have had more offers. How long was the period from that letter of intent? And by the way, folks, the letter of intents are generally non-binding, fully contingent on due diligence and a further detailed asset purchase agreement. I'm curious, Clay, Pat, how long did it take to go from LOI to closing?
Pat, you might have to help me out here.
The actual LOI date was June 14th.
Okay. And I believe we closed sometime in the first week of August. So about 6 weeks or so.
Right in there.
I think the LOI was maybe 30 days, but we extended it a bit. There was some additional due diligence and some questions, but
And they ended up obviously working on a consulting agreement, a lot of things that really benefited Clay. So some of that went a little slower in that situation. So about
touch on that a little bit, Clay, because you said something early on. You said something about, we and customer service and what you're doing now, as if you're still involved in the business. So you didn't sell it and fully exit. They asked you to stay on as a consultant?
Yeah. So it was interesting. In some of the offers, a lot of it was, how involved do you want to be? And my initial thinking was that I really don't want to be involved at all. I want to be done with this and move on, do whatever's next. But what we did, because we still have all the inventory here and have everything in the warehouses, we agreed on kind of a transitional service agreement where we will continue to more or less do what we have been doing for the last 5 years for them, for a period of time until things get completely settled out. It's bought them some time to figure things out, and it gives us still the control and visibility and everything. We're handling customer service still, so we know there's that high level as we get new people trained up. So it's been an interesting journey. The sale happened, but I'm actually more involved in the day-to-day of the business than I have been in a long time. So,
interesting. And this is, I think, a big exception to the rule. Most of the times when it's an aggregator buying the business, they're taking it over, kicking you to the curb if that's what you want. But the reason for this is because you're shipping, you're doing the pick, pack, and shipping, the storing all yourself. You don't have a 3PL. Right. So it's natural that they need to figure out how to transfer control of that and take control of it.
Right. We are still acting as a 3PL kind of for them. And I never wanted it to be a burden. So it was always, we have an agreement in place, but it's always been open-ended. Like, hey, if you want to leave it here longer, that's fine. We don't want to get to a point and say, hey, this stuff has got to be out of here and kind of leave them in a bind. Yeah. It's in everyone's best interest to make it as easy a transition as possible. So, that's what we've been doing, and it's been working well.
A lot of people selling their business fear, who their buyer is going to be and the relationship with them and so on and so forth. It sounds like you're still working with them and you're enjoying it. How has that relationship grown from that initial call and your first impression of them to working with them today?
I've been actually really excited and blown away about the prospects, at their growth and the staff that they have, all the things that I wanted to do for the business but couldn't, the expertise and skills that I lacked or didn't have the time to do. They have staff that is experienced in that, have come from, other big companies. And, so I felt good, especially going through the process. As we talked through it and met some more of the staff, I got more comfortable with the future of the company and that it would be in the right hands. And so, it's been a great transition, and really every time we meet and something happens and I see the slide decks that they put together, I'm impressed. And so I think it's best decision, honestly, for the business and the future, to get it in the hands of somebody that can handle it, do the things that I couldn't do.
Do you wish you rolled some equity?
What's that?
Do you wish you still owned a piece of the company, that they bought it from you but you get to roll 10% or so?
Not really. We negotiated back and forth a lot on the agreement, got where I think everyone was satisfied, and I was okay with it. There's some components of it of, maybe some potential future earnings. So, it motivates me again to stay involved and kind of help see things through. But really, I don't really wish I had maintained a piece of it. No, I'm satisfied.
I think it's really amazing. I mean, the one thing, if people could watch and if they're listening, thinking about selling, Clay was the most realistic entrepreneur. I mean, he said he would sit on calls and a lot of people would be scared to do exactly what he did. They would talk about advertising. And I remember this, so I'm going to try to quote it as best I can, but I'm going to butcher Clay. He explained his advertising philosophy, which he only advertised like 2 or 3% a year, which is incredible to do the numbers and have the growth that he had. Wow. But he said, well, I ran some ads and some of them worked, and I ran some other ads and they didn't work. So I just didn't run those. And then I made some new ones and we ran those ads. That was his explanation. And he said it straight out that he wasn't good at marketing. He threw himself on the sword, and that trust is what ended up building that confidence, I think, with the buyer. And that's why they were all in with him. And after talking with him several times, they are thrilled at the business that they have now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think being a likable seller is kind of the secret to getting the best deal structure and maximum value. You're just honest, sincere, and what you did, Clay, was you didn't. You said it early on, and I was going to interrupt you, but you were saying such important stuff I didn't want to, and you talked about you didn't want to have a race to the bottom. You wanted to build a really high quality product that was going to be really satisfying for the customer. And so what you did without even knowing or consciously doing it was you were building a great company for a great buyer to take over at a great value, right? It's great value for you and a great value for them. It wasn't, I'm in it for Clay. I'm going to make as much money as possible and then get out. You were just doing something out of a passion and an interest and a side hustle and just building something really great. And you took good care of it, even though your financials apparently were a mess, but you took good care of the brand, and the financials got fixed, but the brand was really cool and you cared for it and you made it the best it could be. And that's what brought you the multiple offers. And most people don't do that. I shouldn't say most people. Less experienced folks are just in it for the money. That's all they care about. They're not thinking about building a great business, which it sounds like you kind of did all along.
It was never about the money. It was like you say, we want to provide an awesome product. It's something that I'm passionate about. We want to be the best that there is on the market. We want to provide the best customer service. And our philosophy was, if we do that the customers will show up, and they did. And, there's a lot of things we could have done differently to cheapen the product or try to boost margins. But, I didn't care about that. It was just grow the company. And then when it did come time to make the exit, like Pat said, it was 100% honesty and transparency. I never wanted to misrepresent myself or come across as something or someone that I wasn't. So, if a question was asked, I was honest about it, and to talk about marketing, I'm terrible at marketing. I was awful at that. We sent, in the history of the company, we sent one email out to our customer list. So, we had 10,000 emails on our marketing list, and we sent one email, and it kind of worked. And so I didn't do it again. And, I was honest about that. And hopefully that came across maybe as an opportunity, because you've got this user base that we just never did anything with. So, certainly honesty is the best policy, right? And I think it helped in this situation.
Is there anything looking back that you, as you were made the decision to exit the business, that you had wished you had done differently?
No, honestly, not really. I did what I thought was right. Certainly there's decisions I could have made that were different. I don't look at any one thing and think that was a mistake to do any particular, action. But no, I don't really have any regrets. The process was simple. Building the company was great. It was honestly more about the challenge of building a company than it was about building something to eventually exit. It was just being able to see if I could do it. I remember in college, in business school, we had to operate this shoe company, and it was this model built on Excel, and you played against people from other colleges. And that was the most interesting thing we did in my 4 years at the university, was operate this shoe company. And honestly, a lot of the same principles from that carried over into real life business. So it was kind of an extension of my university game of operating that shoe company, and I treated it as such, and it worked out.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to University of Tennessee at Chattanooga.
You need to go back and look at that professor and get in front of his students and tell them your story, because it worked, right? Look at what you've accomplished.
And it's funny, there's a little story I'll tell you with that. I took an import-export management class, I think my junior year, and it was an elective. I didn't have to do it. It sounded interesting. Part of the course was to actually import and try to sell a product. And about 6 weeks into it, I had a full load. I think I had maybe 15 or 18 other hours that semester, and it got to be too much. And so, what's going to get cut? Well, it's the elective that I don't need. So I went and dropped the import-export management class. And I remember that professor, he was actually kind of rude about it. He singled me out in class and said something to the effect of, not being able to cut it or whatever. So, if I can ever find out who that professor was, I'm going to go back to him and say, your import export management class really didn't make any difference, anything, because look at this. So yeah, I still remember that. I guess sometimes somebody taking a poke at you kind of motivates you to do well. But yeah, I think about that often, about how he gave me a hard time for dropping that class, but didn't matter, I guess.
That's
Go
awesome.
back and look at your records and call him out.
Yeah, I need to. I think I will.
Keep us posted. I want to know about that.
I'm going to look him up. I'm going to make a note. I'm going to look him up today.
Any advice that you'd give to entrepreneurs in the making here that are listening to the podcast, or people that may eventually exit their business? Any advice that you want to impart?
I'm not one really for advice, I guess, but like I mentioned earlier, focus on what you're good at, know what you're not good at, and be willing to be transparent about that. If it's something you can't handle, outsource it to someone that can. Things will fall into place. Just focus on building the best product and providing the best customer experience, and everything else will fall into place. If you're thinking about exiting, don't be scared. I was terrified. It ended up not being a big deal at all. It was actually a really interesting ride, getting into the negotiation of contracts. It was a little nerve-wracking, but Pat was a great guide through that process. So thank you, Pat. And just don't be scared. If you think it's time to exit, start exploring that. And like you said, start early. I think things will work out better if you kind of have a longer time horizon, don't have to rush it. So, I think that's what little advice I have to offer.
Fantastic. Pat, any last words?
Yeah. I mean, as an entrepreneur, obviously, the sponsor. So I'm going to give a shameless plug. Everything that we did is in the book that we read, and it's the philosophy we have at Quiet Light. Clay executed it in the best way he could have. He was a humble entrepreneur that came in and said what he was good at, threw himself on the sword when he wasn't good, told his story, and was very genuine, and everything works out from that point. It was an incredible ride. We had so much fun on the calls trying to get everything switched over, and the group is super happy. I've talked to them recently. They're looking at another deal, and they just talk, they just rave about you, and it's exciting, and I'm happy for you. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, Clay, congratulations on your success. It's a heck of a story. Keep us posted on what happens with the good and bad professors.
Definitely.
At University of Tennessee, and hopefully we'll have you back on and learn about your next eventual exit someday. Hopefully, though, it's not a side hustle anymore. I'd like to see what you can do, really fully focused on something.
Yeah, I'm in that position now. I've spent the last few weeks kind of brainstorming, deciding what I'm going to do next. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. Just have to settle on what it is.
Great position.
I got to know, you're such a humble and easy guy. What's the first thing you bought? Magnet, fishing magnet.
So I decided I really wasn't going to buy anything, but I kind of broke that, and I bought a projector TV and a 100-inch screen for our basement, kind of set up a surround sound. And that's actually the only thing that I've bought.
There you go.
That's awesome. You deserve it. Have fun with that. And be sure to invite mom and dad over because they deserve a little treat too.
We've had them over to watch some movies already.
Awesome. Clay, thanks for coming on and sharing your story. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, that is a wrap of this incredible exit episode of the Quiet Light podcast. Pat, good experience there with Clay. Happy to have you on board and co-hosting the podcast with me.
I appreciate you having me here. I mean, Clay was an incredible guy to work with. I think what, was one of those deals that he made it so easy on me, and the people that were the buyers tried to make it easy on him. It was like a perfect example of when you take the time and you spend the time to work through it. And he spent an exhaustive amount of time on his financials and making sure his business was in the right place. He did all the right things, and it was an incredible thing for him. And it was just an exciting time for both of us. We were so happy when he got the wire. We talked and we were on Zoom. It was just fun.
Yeah, it's quite the story, quite the success story. The only thing I think if he could do it all over again, he said he wouldn't change a thing. But what I would do is have him hire that e-commerce bookkeeper at the beginning, not at the end, because he might have gotten more excited about the business and jumped into a full-time or grown it larger than he thought he could. That 2 to 3% on advertising he's spending nothing on advertising and still growing it. He's doing most of his growth on Shopify, where most people are, growing on Amazon. It's pretty incredible all around, especially that it was a side hustle. He still has it. He still has his day job. He got multiple millions in his bank account, and he hasn't quit his job. So
he did tell me that he refreshed his bank account like 9 times the first night. So he admitted that was kind of. He's such a good guy. And the funny thing was, we asked him, how did you build your customer service? Do you have SOPs? He went, well, my mom talks to everybody, and she's really nice. That's just kind of the way it was. And he's just a great guy, and it's a great business.
I was going to ask
him to have him in.
I didn't want to put him on the spot, but I was going to ask if mom and dad got a piece of the pie of the sale in case they didn't, and he was sharing this podcast with them later. Plus, I didn't want to have to edit anything out because I don't want to have to do that. Anyway,
that's right.
Thanks for co-hosting with me, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, it was fun.
You're going to come back and do it again with me?
100%. Anytime. Let me know.
Awesome, man. I'll do. Okay. Thanks, folks, for listening to the Quiet Life Podcast. Please reach out if you have any questions. If you've got a business you want to get a valuation on, reach out. Just hit the valuation form at quietlife.com. We're here to help no matter when you're going to sell your business. Talk to you next week, folks.